righty, good evening. I think we're ready to begin our deliberations for the evening. And to that end, I think we'll begin with reports from the dais. So, UVA?
Thank you, Chairman Mitchell. I do have a few items from the university to share tonight. First off, so we have an upcoming Board of Visitors meeting in September, and it's a relatively light agenda in regards to the Buildings and Ground Committee, but there will be an update to our historic preservation report. And then following on top of that, I do have a couple sort of construction-related updates. So the Fontaine parking garage is making great progress, and it's, through the difficult parts I think I mentioned at our last meeting with some of the excavation that was associated with the foundation work and some blasting. And so that is all was completed ahead of schedule, and it is on track to be done a little over a year. So in fall of 2025, that parking garage will be operational. And then similarly, over at Fontaine, the energy plant construction is progressing, and so a number of the geothermal wells have been drilled and footers are being poured. The North Grounds parking garage is another sort of key element to address the parking issues. That the initial bridging documents are complete. It is now it's a design build delivery project, so it's currently going through the shortlisting process to identify the ultimate team that's going to complete the project. Affordable housing update from the UVA Foundation. So I talked previously about both the Piedmont site and the Wirtland Street projects. And so there has been a strategic decision to sort of move forward to prioritize the Wirtland Street project, with the Piedmont project following right after. And this was done in order to not have the two projects compete for the same associated housing tax credits. UVA Health System is going to be taking the lead on a comprehensive planning study for both the Grove Street and the Oak Lawn properties. So those will be looked at holistically as opposed to two sort of individual planning efforts. And I will be happy to report more on those as that effort takes shape. So that's all I have.
Ms. Ritker?
Yes, hello. So just last week, I was at a tree commission meeting. I did miss the previous one, being out of town. Anyway, and they, Parks and Rec has an RFI out for an urban forest management plan. So there was a lot about a talk about what the consultant would be able to provide, and what kind of cool things people could do, like apps that they could go out and identify trees, some more citizen participation with that. There was talk brought back to the notable trees or heritage trees, and how to get that program back into the sort of moving faster. It maybe hasn't been getting as many nominations. I think we're going to hear more about that tonight. I think that's pretty much, those are the highlights. And I think we're going to be hearing more about the ordinances. So there was some talk about how do you get more teeth in the preservation of these large trees in town.
Okay.
I've been following progress on the Virginia Housing Commission, looking at potential legislation for next round about accessory dwelling units and faith in housing. Right now, both are not looking terribly promising as far as meaningful changes, but more about recommendations, considerations. Thou shalt think about this. So not holding my breath on big changes out of the Housing Commission.
Mr. Dorancio?
Couple of items. TJDBC did not meet for their usual August. We punted that just because it's the doldrums of summer. However, we had to hold a special meeting at the end of July to hold a public hearing in order to complete an application process for a USDA matching grant for minor home repairs, et cetera, that has no bearing on the city because there's not one address in the city that is qualified for it. But Counselor and now Vice Chair of that operation, Payne, and I were attending there to fill out a quorum. We already discussed in the pre-meeting adjustments to the virtual meeting rules and how that may or may not come trickling down to this commission at some point. The HAC held its organizational meeting sort of to chew over its work plan for the next year and how to prioritize what's going to happen in what order. Most of that had, I can go into appalling detail on that right now, but it's not quite crystallized, except that how we go about things procedurally is sort of floated to the top. And I will have more on that in the next meeting as we get actual work product for that and what we want to do and in what order. We had the kickoff meeting for the CAF HOPS committee last week. That's the Charlottesville Affordable Housing Fund and Housing Operations Fund. We had the kickoff organizational meeting for that last Friday. We are having another one on the 28th. A couple of items there that may be of more general interest. Number one is we are working on the scoring and evaluation tool because it is one of those things that has been amended, stacked upon, fiddled with. 4 different people have authored it, and it needs to, over the years, and it just needs to be fixed. A couple of those are classic examples when you read them of the sort of scoring criterion questions. It's like somebody rewrote that 4 times to try to get their point across, and it is now a word salad. So I don't know how to answer that question. We are also looking at sort of revamping and clarifying some of the documentation that accompanies the applications, including a couple of things of how and some of that is also turned to trying to make it less obstacle-ridden for smaller, less established applicants for these funds. And we have a bit of, unlike CDBG, we have a bit of flexibility there because hey, required documents for the CAF funding is whatever the CAF committee says are required documents for CAF funding. So things like audited financials are burdensome to small operations, for example. So we're looking at that. Land bank should be moving forward, but it has gone a little bit fallow. We're sort of regathering ourselves, and I'm meeting with Sam Sanders on Thursday to get an update for exactly where we are and how we're moving this forward. Did I have anything else? That's enough.
Yeah, disappointing that the land bank is slowing down. That
Me too.
seemed like a good momentum at a
Well,
point.
I'm pedaling as fast as I can, boss. Honest.
Mr. Stolzenberg.
Yeah, I guess it's been 2 months, but I've only had 2 meetings over at MPO Tech. Now that the Moving Towards 2050 plan is adopted, we're back on a bi-monthly meeting schedule. In June, we had a presentation from VDOT on the Barracks Road Smart Scale concept. We had a lengthy discussion about the long area between the overpass and Georgetown Road without a crosswalk, and strongly recommended they find a way to put a crosswalk in, and they will explore that. Then we also had our June LUPAC meeting was canceled. In July, we had updates from the transportation people from each entity. From the city, I think you probably have heard everything that was talked about, except that there's now a map of bike parking everywhere in the city and UVA that our bike ped coordinator has put together. So you can find that on the city website. Over in the county, they gave an update on each of their smart scale projects that they're applying for. I think the one closest and most relevant to us probably is the one at Hillsdale and Rio, where they're proposing a dog bone roundabout with sort of 2 roundabouts next to each other merged into one. And then the UVA gave an update from their parking and transportation. First on their North Grounds garage that they are very excited about, Also, they say that they're never going to purchase another diesel or fossil fuel powered bus ever again. But they did not get a grant from the federal government for low emission buses this year. And they are looking at an electric mini bus to kind of tide them over and reduce wear and tear on their diesel fleet until they can procure full-size electric buses, since the supply chain is so long for that.
Very cool. Thanks.
I had an easy month. The BAR did not meet in July. In our June meeting, the only project of significance was we looked at a preliminary discussion for the UVA affordable housing project at Wortland and 10th. I feel like I've already talked about this before. If I have I? Okay. It's been so long ago. It's just a 6-story Texas donut. They capped it at 6 stories instead of going up to 11 because of the construction type was more affordable, and also I believe for parking. So they didn't present much more than just basic massing. So the discussion was just basically the BAR saying, provide some permeability from the street and respect the streetscape, and that was about as much as we saw.
Very good. Excellent. All right, let's see. Got a few updates. The annual meeting will be next month, and Mr. Duranzio and Mr. Solveitz have agreed to be the nominating committee. So they will be presenting a slate of candidates that we'll need to vote on for VP and vice chair and chair next month. Just met with Ms. Creasy and Mr. Freeze to talk about an idea that they've got about us helping develop the legislative agenda for the city. And Mr. Freeze is going to go into greater detail about what he'd like to see in that when he presents. But I'll need 2 volunteers to do the work. The news that you need to know is that you need to be ready to present your idea to the Planning Commission by the 27th, which means, Ms. Creasy, when do they need to give you something in writing?
So we talked about at the meeting the Friday before that would give some time for review of whatever we're starting with. Again, this is our first go round of this experience, and so we'll be learning as we go. But in order for folks to have some time to look at things, it would be great to have it on the 23rd, and then we could post it that afternoon. And so that gives the weekend for folks to think about that prior to the meeting on the 27th.
So what we're just asking you guys to do is just have us sit down over lunch or coffee with Mr. Freeze and brainstorm some things that you want to bring to the board. This will, of course, iterate as well, because we may have you guys talk to council as well as we move along. The BZA, after that meeting for 6 months, we've had 2 almost back-to-back meetings. The first meeting was attended by Ms. Creasy, and that was just an orientation. I think we've got 2, maybe 3 new members on the BZA, and we just wanted to get them oriented to the work we do. But we also wanted to orient the BZA to the new development code. And frankly, I think there's only one major modification that we need to worry about in the BZA, and that's in section 5.2.11, and that speaks to administrative modifications, and that allows the applicant to make appeals during the hardships if they're caused by coverage requirements or setback requirements. So nothing significant there. We also had a hearing, the first hearing we've had all year, and this was relating to homestays. And the attempt was to appeal a denial by the zoning administrator. What the zoning administrator denied the application because the intent of the ordinance, the homestay ordinance, is that you live in the home for 185 days. while you're doing the homestay dealing. But, so he, the zoning administrator denied it, but we actually overruled him and voted in favor of it. Not because we didn't agree with the intent, because we totally agree with the intent, and we totally agree with the reason he denied it based on the intent, but there was a letter of the law, a G that was not properly crossed, an I that was not properly dotted. The ordinance reads that you must be in the homestay 185 days during the permitted period. You don't have to be in there 185 days before the permitted period. So we need to go back and take a look at that and tweak that, because there's some gaming that's going to happen with that. And so we overruled it, not because the intent was not what it needed to be, but because the letter of the law was not what it needed to be. So Mr. Freeze, Ms. Creasy are aware of that, and Mr. Brody is aware, and they're working on that as well. I think that's it for me. Ms. Creasy, anything from NDS?
Question for the chair. You volunteered Mr. Sully Yates and myself for the
Wait,
legislative.
let's wait until Mr. Freeze does his pitch.
Oh, gotcha.
Sure, so I'll go ahead and start by just noting upcoming work sessions and other such things, and then turn it over to James to talk a little bit about that. So we are planning to have a work session on the 4th Tuesday of August. Again, at the pre-meeting, we noted we have the 4th Tuesday penciled in, and if we haven't had work sessions in a little while, because during the zoning ordinance, we had them every week, maybe 2 a week. We had many of them. So there was a little bit of a rest period, but now we'll probably be having those a bit more often. So to re-pencil in 4th Tuesdays, so we'll be prepping for a work session on the 27th, and that will be what James talks about in a second. And we're also working on the work session for September 24th. Which we have planned at the moment to be a joint session with Albemarle County Planning Commission about the climate resilience project that's being done between our localities. And these will be updates from both city and county staff, and an opportunity to meet with the County Planning Commission. We haven't done that in quite a while. We had COVID. Then we were working on different projects at different times, and then there were different staff changes, and now this is just a good opportunity to regroup. We're also talking about other topic areas where there would be interest to have future joint meetings to continue that dialogue, so we'll see how that goes as well. So a lot of things moving forward on that front. We're set for our CIP discussions coming in November and December. I know it pops up right away. So the budget office has set schedule with us, and I already have those timeframes set. So our regular things come up, as well as our new and exciting items. So I will go ahead and turn time over to James to talk about content for our August 24th meeting.
Sure. Is this working?
We can hear you.
Fantastic. So as Chairman Mitchell mentioned, the idea here is to put together a letter essentially to council around their legislative priorities for the upcoming state legislative session. So this is actually in response to comments or requests that have been made by commissioners over the last couple of years of how do we get engaged in this process. Every year, council puts together their set of priorities and forwards those on to the delegation. How can we have some input into this? So this is how we do it. we submit a letter. So the idea is that with a couple of commissioners, we'll meet and talk about what those priorities might be, put those together into a draft letter that then will come to the Planning Commission for consideration and ultimately a vote of the commission to forward that letter on to council at your August meeting. Pretty simple and straightforward. Any questions for me on that? Great.
Right, so Ms. Creasy, Mr. DeBronzio, and Mr. Sully Yates have agreed to meet with James to
Okay.
chat about this.
All right, and I'm sure we will jump on logistics right away because timeframes are short.
Is that all you have? Ms.
Yes.
Creasy? Alrighty, we are now ready for the one and only public hearing we're going to have tonight. So if there's something that you all would like to talk to us about relating to the work that we do, now would be the time to do that. And you may even want to talk to us about the public art project that we're going to get presented later on, or the street tree project, or anything to do with the work we do. Ms. Creasy, would you walk them through the rules? And
Sure. So this is an opportunity for matters from the public, and we do not have any individual public hearings this evening, so any item that you would want to speak on, this would be the opportunity to do so. Each speaker will have 3 minutes time to address the Planning Commission. We'll alternate between in-person and then online. And then we'll alternate back and forth as long as we have speakers. We'll check in with the chair about timeframes depending on how many interested speakers we have moving forward. But typically we have an opportunity for everyone who wants that opportunity to be able to take that opportunity. So we'll go ahead and get started, and we'll have our first person who is interested in speaking, who is in person. If you're interested in speaking, you can just raise your hand. We don't have an advanced sign up, so we could have this gentleman come up first if you would like. Sure. And you'll have 3 minutes, so make sure to provide your name and address for the record.
Thank you.
Thanks.
My name is Bob Troy. I live at 108 Chandler Court in Charlottesville. I am the president of the Willoughby Property Owners Association and a resident in that subdivision. And I'm here to share our concerns about the proposed Willoughby Place development by Woodard Properties, which, for interesting reference, lands entirely within the footprint of Willoughby, on parcels that are not part of the neighborhood itself. We have real concerns about zoning for the property. The arithmetic of their preliminary site plans aligns with the zoning, but it certainly does not align with the nature of the neighborhood or the way the rest of the area around it has been developed. And we think that should certainly be a part of that. There are 84 units proposed, and there are concerns about access to the proposed development itself and the added pressure to the intersection out at 5th Street Extended and Harris Road. That's already a problematic intersection, and there's been a lot of development recently that's already added well beyond the capacity that intersection experienced when it was designed and built. And so we're concerned about those two things, both the entrance on Harris Road inside the footprint of Willoughby and at the outer intersection. So there's multiple safety pieces there. There are ongoing questions about the access easement and its use. And there's concerns among the association members and neighbors about that point as well. I'm also very concerned about the environmental impact on Moores Creek. The increase in impervious surfaces and the rather significant critical slope drop leading into Moores Creek will certainly add to erosion pressures on the creek. We've seen erosion pressures on the creek cost the area quite a bit of money. Ravenna Water and Sewer Authority had to install a pretty large granite block wall to protect a sewer main that runs right along Moores Creek because of the runoff from 5th Street Station. Not all of that stormwater management at 5th Street Station has performed as well as it needs to. And this will certainly increase that pressure on Moores Creek in terms of its erosion. Also, the likely direction of any outflows, especially at high storm rates, which of course are happening. A one-year event happens several times a year now, we recognize, and that will probably lead to erosion that will also possibly undercut the roadway of Fifth Street Station Parkway that's across the stream from this proposed development. You'll hear much more from us as this moves forward, but we certainly wanted to get this on your radar. Thank you.
Thank you, Bob.
All right, we'll check in with our online audience at this point. We have no attendees virtually at this moment. I'll keep monitoring that as we go forward, though. Our next in person? Please come forward. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Joan Albiston, and before I start, I'd like to just turn and say, how many people here are here because of the Willoughby Place project? These are all of our neighbors and residents of the Willoughby Neighborhood Association, and so that gives you a feel for our concern. So, my name is Joan Albiston. I'm a resident of Willoughby and a landscape architect. I live at 921 Royer Drive. I understand that preliminary plans for an 84-unit multifamily project developed by Moores Creek LLC has been submitted to the city and has been reviewed by city staff. I also understand that the project is considered a by right project, barring issues with the easement, but I have major concerns about two particular details of the project: the narrowing and tightening of curves of the travel lanes of Harris Road at the Willoughby Neighborhood Association entrance, and potential grading within the extensive critical slopes of the site. Narrowing travel lanes for a section of Harris Road at our entrance to 11-foot widths, about the width of a standard driveway, with mountable curbs in the middle of the road and painted area where vehicles are encouraged to not to stray, while tightening the curvature of the road for the benefit of Willoughby Place site triangles, will make travel for the existing 238 households of Willoughby even more hazardous than the adjacent Fifth Street Harris intersection currently makes it, as you heard earlier. As first proposed in 2011, I expect that any proposed development design for the adjacent county parcel will be similar in scope, with the additional vehicular traffic most likely directed onto Harris Road at the Willoughby Place entrance as well. The nearby intersection at Fifth Street and Harris Road is already overburdened with accidents occurring frequently. Willoughby residents have repeatedly requested that intersection be made safer, as it is the only intersection by which we are able to leave and enter our neighborhood. If the Willoughby Place project moves forward, the Fifth Street Harris intersection must also be improved to support the increased traffic through it. Of equal concern for me is the substantial negative environmental impact of the proposed project on the rocky, steep, critical slopes where stormwater flows directly into Moores Creek and its riparian buffer. I understand that the majority of critical slope waivers are approved by the city. At what point are critical slopes actually worth protecting? What acreage or grade of critical slopes is too much? When the slopes exist in undisturbed woodland, when the stormwater flow feeds directly into Moores Creek, an already overburdened stream, when on-site water quality and quantity treatment will likely be inadequate for a substantial amount of groundwater recharge, when Charlottesville is working towards establishing a climate action plan, when Charlottesville has been awarded a community flood preparedness funding grant for the city section of Moores Creek. All of those factors exist now. Now is the time to decide at what point critical slopes are truly critical. If and when a Willoughby Place critical slopes waiver application comes before you, I respectfully request that you hold the line and deny any waiver for this project. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
All right, our next in-person speaker? Yes, ma'am.
Good evening. My name is Joelle Meinshall. I live at 621 Harris Road in the Willoughby subdivision. If you're not familiar with Willoughby, it is a single-access subdivision created in 1978 with 238 homes located off the city's entrance corridor and adjacent to 5th Street Station. My purpose tonight simply is to deliver written notice and be on public record of the Willoughby homeowners' opposition to the proposed Willoughby Place Apartments. Again, a 94-unit, multi-story, multi-building apartment complex with the phase 2 of an additional 150 or so units on the Albemarle County side, accessed only at the Willoughby entrance and in the view shed of our entrance corridor. The letter handed to your staff with supporting exhibits has been signed by over half of the homeowners so far, showing their support of this opposition. This letter has 4 reasons as to why we oppose the proposed Willoughby Place development. There are additional reasons, valid reasons, for opposing this development, such as critical slopes and doubling the traffic volume in and out of Willoughby. They're single access. However, the homeowners have prioritized this list for more immediate attention in the preliminary planning process. Members, you may contact me via email. If you need further information and clarification, I'll make sure Missy Creasy has it. Thank you for your time, and we look forward to any opportunity to discuss this project as it is coming for your review yet again.
Thank you.
All right, next speaker? Yes, sir.
I just wanted to clarify that the documents we presented to you, we're going to give you an electronic copy. We didn't realize we should have brought enough paper copies for you. So we'll provide that to Missy tomorrow, and electronically everything is available to make it easier for your absorption. Thank you.
Thanks.
All right, next speaker? Any additional speakers?
I'll just take a moment. I'm John Owen. My wife is with me here, 919 Warrior Drive in Willoughby. Excuse me for the scratchy voice, but probably my main concern as both a school teacher and principal is the safety of children. Our demographics have shifted quite a bit recently in a good way. We have lots more young children in the neighborhood, and I really fear for their safety. Thank you.
All right, do we have any additional speakers? Yes, sir.
Hey, good evening, everybody. My name's Logan. I also live in the Willoughby neighborhood. I am all the way in the very back. When we met Ben out there the other day, we had a great point about if there's ever any type of evacuations from the neighborhood. I'm the last one out. But the main things I wanted to talk about were the Harris Road and 5th Street intersection. The traffic right there backs up from the turn into Wegmans. You've got accidents there regularly. On our neighborhood Facebook page, there are constantly people posting, there was an accident at the intersection, maybe avoid it for 2 hours. It happens quite a bit. There's a couple of, there's at least a cross or two out there, and that, we've gone over that corridor there in terms of its speed limit before. The yield at that intersection is just incredibly confusing. Even when Ben Kobe and us were standing there, we watched multiple cars misuse the turn, avoid not using blinkers. A cyclist actually crossed diagonally at rush hour, which I thought was a death wish, but that was the 5 minutes that we just stood there, and it frequently backs up from Wawa into that intersection. As we stood there, we watched multiple cars come in up the curve and do U-turns on the blind curve to go back out, and we only see that getting worse as once Wawa opens up right there. We just see that corridor just becoming even more congested and confusing. And then even as you exit the intersection, exit the neighborhood, that curve is just backs up, it's uphill, it's confusing, it's so many times I've sat there and watched the other car directly across and I'm going, I don't trust them. Nope, they're not gonna do what they did. And 50% of the time they just make a different turn and it's just unpredictable. The Harris Road, where that development is coming into the neighborhood, or where that development is coming onto Harris Road, I have a 6-month-old daughter that I hope to put on a bicycle here soon, and I'll never go up there. I don't like going up there as it is. I don't push a stroller up past. Joelle lives like a couple hundred feet from there, and we usually stop and turn around at her house because it's just people fly up that hill. It's a blind uphill curve, which is right where they want to put these mountable curbs. The sight lines are already terrible. Every time it snows, there's at least one car stuck there for a day or two that as you drive in now, you have to rapidly accelerate to get up that snowy, icy hill. And you're like, oh, great, another obstacle to dodge. Not to mention the other cars coming back down the hill. So yeah, those blind uphill curves are super fun. And then just to wrap it up, I know the city likes to talk about its urban tree canopy and tree canopy coverage for the city, and here you have just this wonderful, nice piece of forest with these fully mature white oaks, and it would really just be a shame to see all that just removed from the city's stormwater protections and rain collection and things like that. Anyway, thank you all very much. I appreciate it.
All right, additional in-person speaker? All right.
Hi, everybody. Alexandra Rebhorn, 815 Harris Road. I'm also further in. I'm merely here to just lend my voice in solidarity to the rest of the folks here from Willoughby. There are a multitude of reasons, opinions, and thoughts on why or why not we should support this project, and I can say pretty unequivocally, even if only half the folks had a chance to sign the letter thus far, that just about every resident of the neighborhood, if they had an opportunity, would say that they are against this project. It's not about infill, it's not about housing, because we know that there are pressures in the city that you are trying to respond to. It is really about egress, it's access to that property. And I've lived in that neighborhood now for 20 years. I walk my dog, I'd say 320 days a year on the trail that goes around Moores Creek. Trees fall because of the erosion. Trees fall in a way in the last decade since Wegmans came in at a rate that is 100-fold from what it was the previous decade. So I just know from experience that erosion problem and the Moores Creek problem is real. Just about every month, at least once a month, I send Bob a text saying there's another tree down, we can't get around it, we got to send somebody in. So those effects are real and felt, and as someone who's sent my kids on a school bus for 20 years, it is crazy trying to get out of there, and now they're driving. And just to Logan's point, we have had to teach them, when you get to our intersection, even if you have a green light, you can't turn. You have to wait because the person across from you is a liar. So imagining adding 84 households' cars, which might be 160 to 200 cars to that pressure, is just insane. And unless there was a way to punch out another road, which I'm also not recommending, P.S., it's just unrealistic and unsafe, and it will not be a win for the people that live there. How are you going to get fire trucks in and out, ambulances in and out, let alone the school buses? So I just think that just about anybody else who would come up to this podium is going to be repetitive, but everyone has a chance to voice their opinion, and we just think this is a terrible idea and it's not been thought through. So we respectfully request that you deny it.
Thank you.
All right. there any additional in-person speakers? Yes, ma'am.
Hi, good evening. Can you hear me? I don't want to take my mask off. Can you hear me okay? My name's Beth Owen, and I've been in Willoughby for 30-plus years. This is new to me coming to City Council, so thank you for the opportunity. I'm wondering, am I allowed to ask you all a question? No? Okay. Then that pretty much answers. What I would like to say then is it would be really nice to know or to invite you to come to our neighborhood. I don't know if any of you have actually turned into Willoughby. And if you haven't, I would encourage you to come because I think that would give you a little bit of an idea of the concerns that we have in our neighborhood. I think it's already been mentioned, we're talking about 84 units. That's at least 2 cars, maybe more per unit. That's a huge number of cars coming in there. And I just can't imagine how that's going to be handled. It's already been said, I think if you come and stand on our corner, the number of people that run the red light, they come up from UVA going 40 to 60 miles an hour. They get to the top there and they gun it through. We've had several, I think 2 deaths, yes, in our neighborhood, not in our neighborhood, excuse me, there, but, and also several people that have been hit. We can tell you more about that. But again, it's a huge safety concern, and I hope you take us seriously. I appreciate you listening to us tonight. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
All right, do we have any additional speakers? Yes, sir.
Hello. Larry Garrettson. I live at 818 Harris Road in Willoughby. You guys are getting an earful from us tonight. I just wanted to note about safety and about infill. I think we all understand it. We understand the development pressures in the city. Support the idea of infill because it takes pressure off of the lovely rural lands that we all enjoy. But infill, I was just realizing recently along the 5th Street corridor has grown substantially in the 20 years I've lived at Willoughby, and it comes with a body count. I just mentioned 5 deaths along that road. When I and my family, my kids, drive up and down 5th Street between Willoughby and downtown, there was a time last year when there were 5 memorial wreaths set up along that road that we passed multiple times every day. What we're talking about with this development is bringing that kind of dangerous pressure into a much smaller roadway, an uphill, steep, curving access that is the only access for the hundreds of homes in our development. And I'd like to ask you to look very long and hard at thinking about enabling that to happen. Thanks.
Thanks.
I have been checking on our virtual audience as we have continued forward, and somebody pops in and out, and they haven't raised their hand, so I haven't seen any interest necessarily from speaking there, but we'll continue to monitor that. Do we have any additional in-person speakers? I'll check our online one more time. Right, and we don't have any additional speakers here. So, Chair.
All right, I will then gavel us out of the public feedback session and move us on to the consent agenda. Mr. Schwartz, do you have a motion?
I move to approve the consent agenda.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any abstentions? Any opposition? Ms. Creasy, the consent agenda is approved. Right. I think we're ready for Maya and Ms. Rainey. Ms. Rainey, are you kicking this off, or is Maya or Mr. Freeze, or who's? We have a wonderful intern that did a lot of really good work for us over the summer, and we're just going to give her a little feedback on the good work that she did.
All right. Mr. Chair, I think you stole most of my thunder there, but. So yeah, this summer we have had Maya Claggett as our intern working on us, and she's a graduate student over at UVA. She's done a fantastic job working with us and working with many of our colleagues in a number of different departments. We tasked her with two projects effectively. One looking at kind of the full body of work that we do around protecting and preserving trees, particularly those in the public right-of-way, and identifying what best practices might exist within the state of Virginia that we could apply or bring to bear here in the city. And then the other item was looking at public art. We have had a number of, the issue of public art has been coming up a lot lately. We've had a number of requests from various organizations or members of the public about installing public art. We have had a general interest in this topic. And we believe it's a worthy topic. I believe it's even cited within the comprehensive plan to encourage public art. But we don't have any mechanisms around selecting public art or even managing that once it's in place. And so we asked Maya to take a look at what best practices there were within the state of Virginia for that type of program. So without further ado, I'm going to turn things over to Maya and let her share her findings with y'all.
Thank you for the introduction. My name is Maya Claggett. So I'm going to go ahead and just jump right in and start talking about some of my findings around public art. For a bit of background, the research that I conducted largely draws from models from Falls Church, Alexandria, Williamsburg, and Richmond. They each offered something slightly different as far as like practices and models. However, Falls Church was particularly informative, so I wanted to give them a shout out as far as like, possible bumps in the road, and also best practices that kind of come from implementing public art programs in smaller municipalities. So that was very helpful. And then just kind of to give you an idea of like what I see for this document, I hope that it kind of consolidates some of my research into a usable format, and it shows that a committee could be formed that kind of helps to advance public art initiatives more immediately, while also looking at a longer term public art plan and trying to form that. And then, so I'm going to jump into an overview of the procedures and guidelines document, which is the one of the outcomes of my research around public art, and was included in the packet for this meeting. It begins with language that could be used to form a public art and memorials commission, and maybe what the makeup of that commission could look like. As it's presented in this document, the commission would serve as an advisory role to City Council on many things related to public art, including the long-term planning, review of public art proposals, and public art commissioning when applicable. And then the following procedures and guidelines in the document cover elements that are typically found in public art plans, and it lays out responsibilities for key actors, notably the Public Art and Memorials Commission, and they would be tasked with creating a master plan, funding, creating a memorials plan or policy, and kind of addressing any changes to these procedures that might better reflect the community. In addition to this, there's review of art proposals and kind of assessing projects. So guidelines and criteria, possible criteria for those are included in this document as well. And also for procedures around commissioning art and what those processes could look like. So while this committee would guide projects, the project management, as it's written in this document, would most likely be done by city staff, specifically as it's written in this document, by the liaison to the Public Art and Memorials Committee. These would be like legal agreements, proper documentation, that sort of thing. And from my research, I just wanted to point out that this new role would be kind of crucial to the success of the committee as it's written, again, in this document. And those responsibilities for this liaison are written out a little bit more in depth in the project management section. And then there's language around deaccessioning pieces in the public art world, and then the Public Art and Memorials Commission could also potentially serve as a resource for private development if they wanted to include public art to an extent. So that's the last part of that document. And then, as I mentioned previously, the language as it's written right now in the document kind of clarifies that all of the recommendations from this Public Art and Memorials Commission would indeed have to go through City Council and seek their approval. And then on that note, I'd like to present the, some options for discussion, which is also in the memo about how the Planning Commission might want to be involved if a more formal art program, like research around that, should continue. So the first option I'd like to present would be that the Planning Commission would become involved when public art requires a site plan or some kind of structural element, like think statues. So it wouldn't include more 2D public art like murals and utility box wraps. And then the kind of second option that came out of my research was the Planning Commission would supply one member who would be a part of the Public Art and Memorials Commission, and then report back to the Planning Commission and communicate their interests in public art meetings, and kind of be involved when they see fit. And this is largely the language in the draft right now. And with that, I'd be happy to turn it back over and answer any questions I have or hear feedback and all that
So
good stuff.
will we go from left to right?
I have a pretty basic question, and this is more about my naivete, but is city-owned property under the jurisdiction of Virginia, the Art and Architecture Review Board at all for public land?
I'm actually not familiar with that
They
body.
have jurisdiction over state-owned land. I don't know
Yeah,
how
I
city-owned
don't-
property, if it
My
extends.
expectation is, given that I've not heard of them, is no.
Yes, I would tend to think so too, because their agenda would be massive if they had to look at every
Right.
municipality, but
Yeah.
it's just something I wanted, it was just something that popped in my head, because I do have to go to them for my job, and so I was
Oh,
curious
sure.
if this
Right,
extended
absolutely.
to any of the sort of city-owned property. But no other specific questions, but.
Very good work. I think it's thoughtful research and helpful to have proposals, because that's the hard part, is to actually get the language there for people to react to. And I especially thought the thinking about donations, gifts, given we recently had the 7th anniversary of the August 11th and 12th disaster, I don't know what, you know, thinking, I think having a clearer way to move forward with both adding and moving monuments and artwork. I think the Planning Commission makes sense when it's a physical, you know, something that has to do with the space around it in terms of looking at it, or, you know, having, I think you had one planning commissioner on the proposed committee at the top. Makes a lot of sense, and maybe there's a different, like, 2D process for murals, or, you know. I did wonder in the very top, sorry, I'm trying to scroll. And this is, of course, a detail for later, but thinking a little bit about making sure the composition of the commission is pretty diverse, and that maybe, you know, there's someone that maybe doesn't have any particular back. You know, I think it's so specific, all of these different characters, and that makes a lot of sense. And then sometimes there could be just a kind of open resident position that might bring a different point of view than sometimes professional people that are in a specific profession might bring. But yeah, I think it's great work and good progress, and it definitely seems like something we need to work on, given especially our recent history.
Historically, when we have considered adding new capacity and new services, we have done so without adding funding or staffing, which is predictable results. Can you talk about the value of funding and staffing this in order to achieve success?
Sure. Yeah. What I've seen in a lot of places who kind of didn't have this built-in staff capacity, including for a couple years, Falls Church, is that the committee focuses on kind of maybe larger scale problems, or not problems necessarily, but more of the long-term planning and kind of values and community input, which is very important. But I think that the importance of a staff person is largely on kind of the approvals process and moving things along, and also definitely from like a legal perspective, having somebody that manages those documents. I don't know if you wanted to say something else, but I would also like to note that at least Falls Church, the person that they have assigned to this role, who's doing, I think, a great job, from what I've heard so far, is this is kind of half of her role. She serves as a full-time capacity for their Parks and Rec department, and so this is like, she also attends to other things and has other roles within the city there.
I was going to add to Commissioner Solier's comment. It just popped up in my mind, but there's the 1% for art precedent that happens in some cities, and that any sort of city-funded project sort of designates 1% to go into a public art fund. And I was just thinking of a way to sort of build in funding. Again, it just sort of moves the money around, so to speak, but it could be a way to sort of formalize the funding structure for public art.
So I'll just, let me respond. Actually, I want to respond to both of those comments. So one of the things Maya highlighted is in her initial presentation and in her response is kind of an important aspect of this, and speaks to what Commissioner Rutger, sorry.
It's okay. It's hard.
Noted as well. We kind of have immediate needs for this body to be at work kind of right now. But we also recognize that to really do its job effectively, it should be working against a larger master plan or plan for public art within the city. What are we trying to accomplish relative to public art? Those types of questions should be answered within that document. So we kind of have to do both at once. And Maya's done a really good job of kind of setting us up for that potentially. But we recognize that to be successful in this space, we're going to have to staff it. We're going to have to make sure that we actually give it the tools it needs to actually do this job that we wanted to do. So, so I've started that conversation in the city manager's office. There's no guarantees. We're going into the budget process. But I think we're going into this with the recognition that we can't do this halfway. We gotta, if we're going to go down this road and address this issue, address the respond to this desire within the community, we're gonna have to do it with some staffing. Interestingly, on 1% for the Arts, the city actually adopted a 1% for the Arts program back in the 90s. But it seems to have gone defunct in the intervening time period, I think not the least of which because an art commission that was established at that time also went defunct. And so it's kind of fallen by the wayside. We have to kind of look at that and start thinking about that within the budget. We have a lot of different projects that theoretically could have a 1% for the arts tacked onto them. But that's a substantial cost too. So we kind of, part of what we're gonna have to do here going forward is look at that again and make some decisions about going forward. I'd prefer to have a 1% for the arts come out of a planning process. But it also is interesting that we already did that. You know, Charlottesville's always at the cutting edge. And apparently we were so back in the 90s as well. So.
Go Ducks. So, a couple of three questions, and one sort of on the role of the Planning Commission, and I'm spitballing here, not necessarily stating aggressive conclusions, but it would seem to me that some of these processes may not necessarily be aided by putting more and more cooks in the kitchen. At some point, much of art is intrinsically solitary before it becomes a community matter. But that in sort of evaluating how we put these guidelines up, make the Planning Commission's role explicitly crystal clear, which is how does this physical object function in the environment, period, with no aesthetic input or judgment from the Planning Commission. That just confuses the matter. It's one more body that you have to sort of placate, please, impress, or confuse. And I think it's just best does the Planning Commission agree that this widget, no matter what it is, can fit on this block in this place? End of discussion. Not, do we all think it's ugly? That's not, or do we all think it's beautiful? Without making aesthetic judgments. And if anyone up here on the dais thinks that I'm making a sidelong glance at the entrance corridor review criteria, you are not wrong. So that's one. Two, to follow up on some of Betsy's comment about how we compose the board, I'm curious as to, I saw that our one at-large member is from this overlay corridor area. What was the process and sort of space as sort of constructing who might be on this board, and how did you get to where you were going there? One of the things I see about this, we're also sort of struggling with this on a couple of boards I serve, is that some of the buckets we have can actually be served by multiple people. You can have an art educator who is also a leader of an art organization, for example. They can go into either box, which can be really convenient when you're trying to staff up the actual members of the board and you're sitting in a closed meeting trying to appoint people, but can also sort of just lead to inadvertent homogenization. So where did we come up with this? And then I guess the other piece I would ask about is that somewhere in here, either with this commission or in city council, in direct opposition to what I just said about the Planning Commission not being allowed to make an aesthetic decision, is some sort of formalized public input process, so that if you have, whether it's very warmly received or whether it's not, and it's, viciously opposed, where people say, that looks great as long as you put a vomitorium next to it, I'm all for it. Just to get an idea of, would there be a public input process and where would that go? And does it make sense to put that at the end with the city council where they get to learn? It seems to me that's the bad place for the city council to start hearing about that on the night they're approving it. So that's a little jumbled, but there are two basic questions there: board composition and public input.
Yeah, thank you so much. So to address the first question, the makeup of this commission is based on a couple of different things. It's largely based on models that already exist and from municipalities that have kind of are a little bit further in this process. However, a lot of the recommendation that I received was to make the committee quite smaller than what other places have, kind of based on their experience. And so it was hard to kind of fill a lot of the, or put out a lot of the buckets that other places did, just because I wanted to kind of consolidate. And so, yeah, I agree. It is definitely like something to consider, and I would love feedback on. a little bit more specifically, the member from the neighborhood corridor overlay, that was partially inspired by the Charlottesville Tree Commission, which has, I think, at least one member from a low-income neighborhood, or are currently a resident in a low-income neighborhood. And so this kind of idea was taken a little bit from there, but changed so that maybe the geographic areas were a little bit clearer and also aligned with the new development code. So that's kind of how I got there. And to answer your second question, public input processes do vary a lot, and it's a great question, and hopefully that the formation of this commission would, in their public art plan, that is kind of that is based on a lot more community outreach and than I've been able to do. They will form a process and kind of clarify those roles and when those kind of public inputs, where those fit into the process of approving or making recommendations. But yeah, definitely something to consider and an important part of a public art program. Does that answer your question? I don't know.
I'm not even sure what I asked. Just say yes.
I guess first to kind of follow up on your request for feedback on committee composition. I think on other committees, we've sometimes found that when we're overly restrictive for certain slots, we find that we don't ever get any applicants for those slots. And I wonder if we could incorporate some sort of out for that, where if there are no eligible applicants meeting their criteria, an at-large member can be appointed, or an interim at-large member can be appointed until a qualifying person is found. I am a little ambivalent about the idea that we would reserve a slot specifically for people who live in a single-family zoned area, but I see the intent. It's just a little weird when I put it that way, maybe. First question I had was, Mr. Freeze mentioned that we need this as soon as possible. I know our transportation planner and bike ped coordinator are eager to start painting streets. Could we incorporate some sort of interim de facto commission before the commission and liaison are fully stood up, so that, I was going to say planning commission, Board of Architectural Review, let's say, can approve some art according to these criteria as soon as possible once this is passed? Does that seem feasible?
We can take that as a comment.
Yeah, I was gonna go ahead and say that I am not quite sure I'm the person to ask about that.
Fair.
But great comment, thank you.
And then I think the thing that worries me anytime we talk about public art, or especially monuments, is there's maybe a line between art commissioned by the government that is sort of government speech under the First Amendment versus creating a public forum where we might have people suggesting art that might be undesired by the community, certainly as something that the city commissions to put in a public space. Does this put us squarely on the side of the protected from someone filing a lawsuit saying, well, you put up their art, you better put up my art? Is that the goal of the criteria? Having criteria for this?
That's a good question. Yes, that's part of the intention here. Yes, yes, to protect us from that type of.
And I guess the question then is is it just creating this plan and criteria and discretionary review of this committee that offers that protection? Is there a risk that the plan that they make is so general that we lose it? That we create a public forum? Do they have to be specific?
I don't know the answer to that at this point, but I know that as we move forward with this idea, as we engage in this, that consultation with our city attorney's office is going to be an essential part of that, because addressing that issue is in fact key to why we're pursuing this, because otherwise we would just have at it, but we've been clearly advised not to do that because of the risk.
Yeah. Okay. Well.
Yeah. Got it.
City's attorney's office.
Yeah.
Right. Thank you for all your work on this.
So my questions have to do with the Board of Architecture Review, and what role they might have to play. Well, no, I think it is important to recognize, what Phil said about too many cooks in the kitchen is very important to remember. So I'm not, I guess my question is, or my suggestion would be that the BAR would at least be able to review something, make a recommendation based on, is art appropriate for a location? Kind of in terms of, something is going to happen to that location. Some material, the existing area will have to be modified. Is that area historic in any way, and can the BAR make a recommendation on whether it's appropriate to change that location or that site? So that would include both public property and public right-of-way. I think would just be important for, again, it's a recommendation. It would not be like our BAR's certificate of appropriateness. I think it's just more of BAR, give your feedback on this location. Is it appropriate for art? And keeping the BAR out of aesthetics. More, again, just whether it's appropriate for that spot and whether something historic might be damaged in the process. And then the other question is, does this clearly distinguish between public and private art? For example, I'm thinking of some years back we had an application for a mural on 4th Street, a very large mural that was supposed to memorialize the counter-protesters for the Unite the Right rally. It was going to go on, it was a pretty tall building on 4th Street. I forget what the name of that building is, but there was a little bit of, I think some of the public, I think was a little upset because there was no public comment, and it just, the BAR was the only people who got to look at it. They ended up not doing the mural because it was a famous muralist. He did the Obama Hope portrait, and I guess when there was some static to what he wanted to do, he just pulled out. But anyways, that was private art on private property. Is there a role that this committee would have for something like that? I'm not sure. I honestly don't know if they should or not, but I wonder if that needs to just be considered, where that line gets drawn.
Yeah, thank you. There is section 7 of the document is kind of some of the research I've gotten around the private side and developer initiated projects more specifically. And I think that this committee could be a really great resource for those kind of conversations. Again, it kind of depends on the capacity of this commission when it's formed, and the public art plan that's reflective of the community and the processes that they want to move forward with, hypothetically. But yeah, I don't know if that answers your question, but definitely something that is being considered.
Okay.
Thank you.
Can I ask just a quick question? So on the Friends of the Downtown Mall, I think, put up the big, I don't know what it is.
Music box. Vinyl wrap.
Yes, vinyl wrap. And it has, it has a music theme on it. I'm just wondering, how did that work? Because that, just out of curiosity.
So my memory is that there was no permitting at all. Did that go to the BAR?
No.
No.
Yeah. I just wondered, because it's something like that, that's it's a private.
Yeah. So the line, and I think it is laid out very well in the materials, the line between private and public, there would be no formal role for this committee on private art, but I think she's written in here the notion that they could certainly serve as an advisory role on a voluntary nature. So that project or the project you referenced could come forward and say, hey, we'd like to do a venue for a public conversation, and could you host? Or we'd like your advice on this, and that could be done in a public setting, and that could be done very well. The other interesting place where we might tap into the expertise of this is on the zoning side. When a mural comes in, sometimes we have to draw the line between a sign and art, and we could consult with this body as to where that line is.
It strikes me as that whole thing could get fraught pretty fast.
Which whole thing could get fraught?
The advisory role on private property for use of private art. What advice are you giving? Are you chilling expression? Are you not chilling expression? Are you inserting the personal biases of staff or appointees up here into the process of doing it? Do we find I'm sort of addressing some of Rory's concerns on the same point on finding could that in fact be fraud in and of itself, because now you're opening the door for those sorts of problems with the private public, with the private art, private property. I mean, we certainly see plenty of that with billboards on roadsides and and free speech, and well, it's awful speech, take it down. No, I own the property, I own the sign.
Yeah, there's no, as it's been written and as we're talking about, there's no formal role. It's completely voluntary. It's whether somebody chooses to come to the body and say, hey, I'd love to talk to this.
I get that. I still don't, I'm not sure I'm not sure I have an answer to my concern is fuzzy. I certainly don't have a solid answer for it.
I do think it would be beneficial to have some mechanism for, say somebody did want to do a mural and they wanted to get some public feedback. Like we think of Derry Market probably could have really used some public feedback before they proposed the mural they did. That got their project basically killed. It seems
600 West Main might be another.
Maybe, I wonder if, and then this is getting in the weeds here, but, maybe on the benefit of coming to the commission for advice wouldn't necessarily be their advice, but whatever public comment, however they usually reach out to the public, they would know the neighborhood, they would know whatever process they use. Maybe that's the incentive, that you get to go through that process and maybe you show 3 examples and get feedback, or if it's, if someone wants to go through that the city would help them, carry that through.
I guess we'd have to have a pretty clear sort of policy that.
If it was a vote, how do you?
Well, or also, if the PAM functions as sort of the public forum for the discussion, then you've got the concern that it also becomes the forum for which people who don't like the art come in to complain, and there really isn't there isn't any sort of enforcement. That's not the role of this body at all. But I can see that getting. And again, my thoughts on this are fuzzy, so my sort of solutions aren't concrete at all either. I'm just, again, spitballing.
It seems valid that there would be a venue to complain. I mean, the complaints wouldn't.
I don't think that there is any lack of venues in which one can complain.
It does seem like the sign versus mural boundary is sort of the place here where this committee would almost have enforcement power, and that maybe concerns me a little. Maybe I'm still mad about the camera shop on High Street getting ruled to sign. That's a very nice mural. It's gone now. It's on the mural map.
Well, I mean,
which was cool. I never seen that.
Wouldn't that work in reverse, though? You'd say, hey, this is a sign, not a piece of art. It's not our business.
No, because the sign has a limit, the size limit, and usually a mural is much larger than the.
Well, yeah, but that's defining.
Well, the problem is, if it's a donut shop that paints a mural of donuts on the side, some have construed that as a sign. It sounds like maybe that this committee would be making that call or aiding the zoning administrator.
I simply suggested as an advisory role to the decision would still need to be made by the zoning administrator.
Okay.
We can't legally give that authority to anybody else.
I see.
So, Mr. Schwartz, do you have anything else?
No, that was it. I'm sorry.
Right, so
Chairman Mitchell, I had a- long
time ago, probably before anyone in this room was born, I had your job. And I interned under Mr. Uja. And I can't remember whether it was initiated by what was then NDS, I'm not sure what it was called back then, maybe it was Neighborhood Development or Community Services, or was commissioned by Parks and Rec. But we put on the downtown mall, right smack there in the middle of the mall near the water fountain, an anatomically correct baby, naked baby. And every now and then, Mr. Hujo and I, we would just take me out and walk me around town, just, making sure that I saw, the people out there, and he'd say, this is my intern for the summer, blah, blah, blah. And whenever we would stop by that anatomically correct baby, at least one person would come up and, what were you thinking when you put this thing out here? So I think it is important. I think Mr. Duranville suggested it, and Ms. Redker did as well, that public input before we put stuff like that up is very important, because the baby's not on the mall anymore, I don't think. And probably didn't last too many years after we put it up.
I just had a quick clarification, looking at the definitions of what, basically public art is. And I was thinking about the new Charlottesville Middle School. It's under construction, and there's murals being proposed for that. And that is somewhat publicly accessible at certain times, some not. I was thinking of this building. I was curious about if there needs to be additional clarification on what's interior versus exterior art, and things particularly in the school systems or other sort of municipal buildings. If there just needs to be a qualifying statement, I would assume those would fall under this effort, sort of murals in public schools. But again, just looking at the definitions, it's not entirely clear. It says it has to be openly and accessible and visible to anyone who's interested. So I know with some of our security policies that are in place now that they're public space, but they may not always be accessible.
And just to piggyback on that, there might be some sense of duration, because you might say as a default, look, kids can paint whatever the hell they want, that they can talk the assistant principal into painting on that wall. We just have the understanding that there's no guarantee it's going to be there after the summer necessarily, or this is not necessarily a permanent installation. So, because you don't want to be sort of mucking or, let's give the school administrators yet one more headache they got to deal with. Right.
Let's talk about trees.
But I think if I understood Chair Mitchell's comment correctly, you're now taking the blame for all future public art by producing this report. So.
Of course.
Hate that baby.
And all the praise for all the beautiful art that comes
Yeah,
through. She gets that too.
All the credit. Yeah. So if you could leave your personal email, so we can forward all those comments to you.
Oh yeah, I'm planning on it. Don't worry. Okay, yeah. I will go ahead and transition to my research around trees. Let me. Okay. Wonderful. So I'd like to start off this discussion by saying that I didn't identify any significant policy avenues that Charlottesville is not already kind of taking advantage of around trees, particularly with the new development code and new tree removal permits that are in place. As part of my internship, and my final kind of report to NDS, I am kind of developing steps and further avenues to pursue, which would include increased staff capacity possibly, so that processes and procedures could be more heavily developed around this tree removal permit, and possibly incentive-based solutions. But in many areas of Virginia, Charlottesville is losing tree canopy, and this is a really important area of research. And also I wanted to just note that Charlottesville is not alone. A lot of the people that I'm talking to in Virginia and the municipalities, they have been pursuing this area in a very similar way. And there's lots of conversations that are happening throughout the state and at the state level. With that being said, Going to another outcome of my research, which is kind of this markup of Charlottesville's current tree conservation ordinance. For this document, just to give you guys a little background, I used models particularly from Arlington, Norfolk, and Fairfax. And under Virginia law, this ordinance basically allows municipalities to establish a procedure around the designation of heritage memorial specimen and street trees. I'm not quite sure how familiar you all are with this ordinance, but these designations can happen both on public and private property, and they include a special protection status for the trees that are identified. And so the language in this like markup, which is a product of my research, I'm hoping will strengthen the ordinance in a few key ways. However, I would also like to mention that after talking with practitioners, it seems that the stronger and slightly different language of this ordinance doesn't have, it doesn't like strongly change the ways that this ordinance is implemented in these municipalities. So with that being said, the first main addition that I've made in this markup is that I'm hoping will strengthen and clarify it, or just, it's really just, again, a product of my research that includes kind of language and like ideas from other municipalities. This section, it's 18X, I believe, is trees on public property, and essentially just making it really clear that trees on city property are owned by the city, and that and it includes language around that if there is any injury or removal of these trees, it would be a Class 3 misdemeanor. And if you're like me, I didn't really know what that meant, but it's basically just a fine of no more than $500. And it's commonly used for like unintentional damage to property, which is kind of why it's applicable here. And then in the later part of this markup, that's like the first main addition. The later part also changes some language around encouraging the nomination of trees on like a broader range of properties. And hopefully by expanding the properties that people can nominate trees for, it'll increase the awareness of this program, even though it would still require the consent of the property owner to nominate and protect these trees. Hopefully it would encourage more conversations around that and more awareness of the program. And that is my short summary of this section of my research. Again, would love to turn over my time and answer any questions or anything.
So following up the nomination of the heritage trees, is the idea that there would be a call for nominations, it would be annualized into sort of an effort that could be sort of brought in just to the rhythm where, I don't know, just a call for entries every year that goes out to the public. There can be a period of response, and then they can sort of ratify the nominations, and then, you know, sort of make, I almost wonder if there's an opportunity to make it into an annual ceremony where, you know, this year's inductees to the heritage trees are these ones, and it could be tied to the Dogwood Festival or something, you know, so again, it could be something that could be part of the kind of civic pride.
That's a great idea.
The other idea, I just want to get clarification, so the harm to the city trees. So James, does this include heaters on the downtown mall associated with cafes damaging bark on trees with their proximity? Yeah. Okay, that's all I have. Great work.
So I'm just been reading through this. I think it's really helpful, good work. The chair of the tree commission is here in the back. Oh, vice chair, sorry, vice chair. Anyway, so the tree commission's gonna be hearing from you, and I think that might help get into some of the specifics, because at the last meeting, the heritage tree was being discussed as, you know, a topic, and how do you nominate, and how do we make this more, well, and also, how does it potentially help someone to nominate a tree in their yard? Like, would they get a city arborist that could give them some advice. I don't know, there's not really as much of that, like, okay, great, what do I get out of this? So maybe there are some things around that wouldn't be too costly to offer someone if they, you know, have this amazing tree and they don't necessarily want it protected, but, you know, some kind of incentive. But I think there's some thoughts from the tree commission on some of those things. They've been thinking through that. But really good work. It's important, and I think it's interesting to hear that you were more focused on like that the pieces are in place, but maybe they're not being administered, or, you know, we don't have the follow through yet, or the processes aren't as widely known to residents. So there might be more about education and here than big changes.
If you read my email, and some people do, something I say a lot is Charlottesville does everything we are legally permitted to do in Virginia about tree protection, which feels nice to say and also bad. I understand other states are doing more than Virginia. Am I right? And if so, who and what are they doing?
Yes. There are a lot of different kind of avenues for tree protection, and it comes up in a lot of different areas of like regulations and incentives. So that's a big question. It's a great question. But something that I think is at least on the state level that Virginia is trying to push through is kind of loosening the restrictions on the percent that's required during development. That's a big area that's restricted, and it's just the percents that you're allowed to require during development are larger in other areas, I think, which is a big thing. There's lots of incentive-based things that are happening in other states, including, like, you know, part of like stormwater fee structures, and yeah, I think I'm trying to think of other things that would be relevant to Virginia and possibly help. Can I recommend a document to you?
Please.
Okay. Let me see. It's called A Select Review of the Virginia State Code for Trees and Forests. It's from 2020, and it's a bunch of foresters and practitioners basically got together to kind of look through Virginia code and ask the questions that you're asking, which is like, where can we push the state legislature to make changes? And they answer that question much better than I just did.
Exciting.
Repeat the title of that?
Yeah, sure. It's a select review of the Virginia State Code for Trees and Forests, a summary report for the Virginia Department of Forestry.
Thanks.
Yeah, I'll send it to you
Please.
guys right now.
I would love, yeah. Great idea.
I have a second question. One thing I understand we can do is spend money. We have basically unlimited authority to spend money. Am I correct that we could put a small amount of money in the budget and give people a small consideration for nominating a tree?
To my knowledge, yes. I might put that over to James. I don't know.
Wonder- Thank you.
It's good. I've been sitting on some nominations that we need to submit, so I'll wait for the. I'll wait.
I was just going to say, I wonder if there's an opportunity. I know there's precedence to get your property tax amended for other
That's
qualifications.
next words. Yeah. The
I wonder-
question is, do we have the authority to
just an
adjust and abate taxes in that matter, or would we perhaps have to ask the state legislature for that? And would that have to appear in the legislative packet? Because I've got no idea if we've got the authority to abate taxes in that way. So, yeah.
Yeah, historic preservation, historic tree, like a historic building, if there's some.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah, but, yeah, what's the criteria for that? So, yeah, again, I think yeoman work here. I have a couple of sort of comments. One is the use of single-family residence. And I'm sure that was advisedly used, but I would like to point out that we have this barely dry ink on our current current zoning where we talk about residential zones and is there a reason we're using single-family residence instead of zone residential RA or something like that as the exclusionary criteria? Because what we're saying is a duplex doesn't apply.
Yeah, so this language is largely taken from other models. And I have, yes, we have discussed with that the language could be revised on that for sure. There's a bunch of comments in my Word doc kind of noting that. Yeah, I think that it's, again, just a draft, and I will definitely take that comment. I think it,
I mean, we
other
all got
than
what you were
that,
driving at, but we were,
yeah.
Well,
I don't know if,
Yeah, no, your answer is great. I actually just want to clarify the comment that you're not just objecting to the use of the word family, but you're suggesting maybe if there's a waiver or an exemption granted, that maybe that should be granted to a higher number of units than one.
What I'm saying is it seems to me that we're giving this, continue to give extraordinary privilege to single-family residents as opposed to, something zoned RA with 2 or 3 units on it. Yeah, and I'm not sure I've got a simple solution to that. I'm just running my mouth.
it would apply to a single family even if it was their own NX10, right? Is that like because specific state code that would not allow us to designate a tree?
not from my memory. The specific terms of like the state legislation are they're not specific in that area. That specific language I think was taken from Arlington, and I think it has something to do with just not upsetting people in people's backyards.
That ship has sailed. So
that's my best answer. Yeah.
Right. And then the second question would be on sort of 18XA, that we be very, very careful about use of the word pruning, maintaining, removal, and putting that on the administrator, because what that will do is greatly annoy the administrator for having to deal with the hundreds of people who maintain, prune, and occasionally remove trees from the city-owned alleys that the city is not maintaining, even though they say they're maintaining the alleys, particularly those who have bought their own property. And I will tell you that at least one member of this commission in the last 2 years has paid a private contractor to clear a section of a city-owned alley that had happened to abut that commissioner's property, just because it more than desperately needed to be done. So some sort of accommodation for adjoining property owners. And to add to that, anybody, as I've said before, who makes an assertion about a given alleyway and whether or not that is a city-owned and maintained, whether that is there by easement, or whether that block has 3 different things going on in terms of who owns that land and who's responsible for it, and we're still calling it an alley and quote right-of-way. Anyone who says they know the answer to that is deluding themselves. This is why, and apparently our current mess is apparently there to facilitate real estate lawyers who have boat payments, because it is absolutely impenetrable to figure out who owns an alley in certain parts, in certain neighborhoods. Even if you think you do and you have a survey that says you do, you don't, or may not. Just comment there.
Maybe it could be changed to accepted right of way.
Well, or make some sort of thing about, other city-owned public lands, or somehow to sort of detail. I mean, it's really getting into the weeds, but that, as it were. But I think we need to be very careful about that, because people treat that as their yard. In some respects, if there's no barrier, for example, my neighbor's yard includes the quote-unquote alley, which I'm grateful to, because he's quite compulsive about keeping it. And that's, but otherwise, I mean, I think, yeah, I think it's, you know, well, every point you make here, I think is well taken here.
Yeah, thanks again for working on this. I guess first question to Lyle's point about doing everything we legally can do. I understand Arlington is getting a little bit sued over their tree protections. Did we take any of the ones that are in that lawsuit into this, or are those separate things that are unrelated, like zoning related or whatever?
I will definitely look into that. I sure hope not. I don't know. Okay.
No.
Cool. Got enough lawsuits. Current and forthcoming. Second question. This language in 18XB1, specifically calling out utility companies, is really interesting because Dominion, of course, is probably the biggest butcher of trees in the city. Does another locality put that restriction on their electric utility, and has that worked successfully, and they actually get these permits and or class 3 misdemeanors?
Speaking of lawsuits.
Yeah, this, yes, I'm trying to remember exactly where this language was used, specifically around that. But, to my knowledge, I don't know actually how effective that this is. I don't think it's anything that I talked with practitioners about in other municipalities. And so, yeah, I will definitely look into that. Thanks for bringing that up.
It's interesting that some of those easements for utilities are quite specific about the utility's absolute right to do whatever they want to do to anything growing in there to maintain their power lines. So, for example, Lower Belmont, Virginia Power can do whatever the hell they want with trees anywhere near their power lines, as long as they're along the easement laid down in 1928 in the county.
Well, this was one of those fun sections that we figure at some point an attorney will spend a lot of time with, because there's franchise agreements that are involved. There's lots of different parts of the puzzle. Yeah, it will be helpful to see if anyone has been effective with this, but my inclination is probably not. But yeah, that was definitely a section where there would be some oversight to, see if how possible. Also, the misdemeanor part is also something that stands out, and again, we're in the early phases, so this hasn't gone through any legal review. I'm sure we'll get feedback. But yeah.
Yep.
Info gathering at this point.
Yep. Well, I appreciate the effort. I would be glad to see us hold their feet to the fire any way we can. So, thanks.
Well, staying on that section, or referring to that section, later on you have the exceptions in section 1811. It says. Routine installation, maintenance, and repair of cable and wires used to provide cable, television, electric, gas, or television service. So that's an exception to anything in the ordinance. So I'm wondering how that works with the section that we just mentioned. And I think you said that the blue text can't be changed or shouldn't be changed?
Yeah, the blue text is basically taken straight from Virginia code on the allowances of this ordinance.
So that seemed like there seemed to be a conflict between those two. And I'd love to see 18XB1 work. I'd love to see you guys figure that out. I noticed that conflict later on in the exceptions. Well, also more blue text on the definitions. It says street trees all need to be individually designated. Do we have a record of every street tree that we call a street tree, or is that what we're going to have to do, or can we change that? Is there a way that we can say, if it's in the public right of way, it's a street tree? And then the next question becomes, if it's on private property, but it's in a, because we have our streetscape ordinance now, how do we make a designation that those are street trees even though they're on private property? Are they on an easement at that point? Yeah. Okay. So is that gonna be a, wait, did you find
There is
it?
an inventory.
I was looking for that. Okay, so we actually have a documentation, a GIS documentation of all the trees?
Wow.
Are those street trees or are those?
2018.
We have had in the past, I'm not sure about the update and whether it determines private versus public, if it's in a right of way or if it's
Okay.
on private property. You know, again, that is a very labor intensive
Yeah.
kind of thing. Even if we have a base from the past, it's still gonna be,
I'm just wondering how someone knows whether their tree falls under this ordinance.
And if a tree falls under the ordinance, sorry, couldn't resist.
Now I'll leave that as a comment, that I guess all the definitions say individually designated, so that, I guess that implies that we should have a list of all these trees that we want to protect them. And then how would the public find out if they happen to have a, you know, if their tree is considered a street tree, or if they have a specimen memorial or heritage tree on their property? Let's see, under 18X(b)(1), it also says where the city is responsible for the maintenance of such easement. And I was under the impression that street trees and the planting strips needed to be maintained by the private property owner, even if it was in the public right of way. So is that do we need to wordsmith that somehow?
That applies to public pedestrian easement, part of that clause, right?
Yeah, I think so. And just, it's the fact that it says that where the city is responsible for maintenance of each easement or of such easement, and it seems like the city shares that maintenance with the private property owner. Let's see. Yeah, I think that's my comments. This is great. I mean, I'd love to see it work.
Thank you.
Ooh, this, once again, great couple months, pieces of work. Thank you. Excellent, thank you. Any more thoughts for Maya? Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Appreciate it.
I appreciate it. I also was not joking before. I am available via email and happy to talk more or answer any questions.
Thank you.
Mr. Durangia,
Yes, sir.
is there something you'd like to do?
I'd like to note that today marks 2 anniversaries of the built and constructed environment for the construction for destruction. For destruction. For example, this is the 82nd anniversary of the day the Army Corps of Engineers began construction on the Facilities for Substitute Materials project. The substitute materials being plutonium and uranium for gunpowder, or the beginning of the Manhattan Project, and also today is known as Barbed Wire Sunday, which is the first day that the construction of the Berlin Wall began in 1961. So if you don't feel like celebrating either one of those particular advances of the built environment today, even though walls don't work and atomic bombs do, I would point out to you that you could go out and celebrate International Left-Handers Day, which is today, and you could do that with Prosecco and filet mignon, because it is filet mignon day, National Filet Mignon Day, and National Prosecco Day today. And I think we should adjourn to celebrate at least some of that.
Is there a second?
Second.
We are adjourned.
Is that every day or just on February days?